Hello and welcome to the VITA Scholars Lesson number 1, VITA 101. Let's get started. In today's lesson, we're going to understand what income tax is, what VITA is. We're going to talk about taxes, who must file the return and why, the goals and the importance of the VITA program, dependents and filing status, and how to prepare a tax return using our software. In a real life class, I would say do not hesitate to stop me. This is not a school class. This is something you are choosing to come to on your own. You're a volunteer. You're here because you want to help people and you want to learn. So even if you're not with me in person, if you have questions, reach out to me. I'm here to help. I do Zoom drop-in sessions every Saturday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Anybody's willing to drop in, just visit my website, vitaresources.net, for the link. And you can also email me, which you can find my email address on my website as well. So let's just start. What are some common types of taxes? And if you were in front of me, I would let you answer this as a class, but since you're not, the most common ones people can think about that individuals pay are sales tax. So like if you go buy clothes at a store, obviously that's tax. There's real estate tax, there's income tax, Medicare, and Social Security tax. And so we're going to talk a little bit about each of these. And why do we pay taxes? It's what makes our country so great. You got to have money to help fund things, right? But without taxes, our country would not be as great as it is now. Taxes pay for emergency services. So when you hear of emergency services, you probably think, ambulance and fire. It's also the hospitals and the police. Pays for our national security. Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, those kinds of things. Pays for health and human services and natural disasters. So we've had quite a few hurricanes come through our area lately and some tornadoes. We've also had COVID. We have elderly people who need help. There's hospitals. Money has to come from somewhere to help with this. Pays for education services, public schools, college grants. Locally, we have the ITech. We have FGCU, FSW. There's quite a few. Also helps pay for infrastructure and transportation, your highways, your bridges, traffic lights, roads, buses, all that kind of stuff. Public parks and conservation, which I absolutely love, helps pay to preserve the land. And the animals, of course. But with VITA, we're going to talk about income tax and payroll taxes. So let's start with how many types of payroll taxes are there. I call them payroll taxes. There's actually 3. These 3 taxes come out of your paycheck, come out of your earnings. There's Medicare, Social Security, and income tax. So Medicare and Social Security tax. These taxes were designed to help people. The Social Security tax, think of it as a little retirement account. You work, and when you work, you pay into this. Everybody who works, whether you're self-employed or if you work for an employer, everybody pays into the Social Security tax system. And when you get older and you are no longer able to work, you retire, you're able to pull money out of the Social Security tax system. But you have to earn so many credits, and how much you get out of the system depends on how much you worked and earned throughout your life. It's kind of like a safety net. Because when you get older, you just can't work, and so you need something to live off of. And most people like myself are really bad about saving for retirement, so this is our little safety net. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. And then there's Medicare tax. Medicare tax also comes out of our paychecks, and it's designed to help pay for our health care when we get older. And it could also be for people who are younger but have disabilities as well, because they're no longer able to work. So these taxes come out of our paycheck. And then there's income tax. And contrary to what everybody says, we don't have to pay tax on everything we make. You only have to pay income tax if your income crosses a certain threshold, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Every year, we must file a tax return to determine what our tax obligation is. Did they take out enough from my paycheck, or did they take out not enough? Am I entitled to some credits because of my kids or whatever, or not? And so we file the taxes to kind of reconcile, to figure out, did we pay in enough or too much? And a real brief history, the first income kind of tax was in 1862. There was a time of war, Civil War, So President Lincoln signed this in, and then 10 years later, the income tax was repealed, meaning it was stopped. And then again in 1913, there's another war coming, so Congress, brought back. And so everybody had to pay 1% of their income as long as they made more than $3,000 towards income tax. And the very first tax return form came to pass that year in 1913, so that's when it all started. Who pays all these taxes? Well, the employees and the self-employed individuals pay these taxes, your Social Security, Medicare, and they also pay income tax. Now, when you work for an employer and they're taking taxes out of your paycheck, what's nice about that is your employer has to pay 50% of whatever your Medicare and Social Security taxes. It's kind of like a benefit for working for an employer. When you work for yourself, you're considered self-employed or a contractor, you're responsible for all that tax. So you have to pay all the Social Security, all the Medicare, and if your income is subject to income tax, then you would have to pay that yourself as well. And so for self-employed people, it can be a very large tax bill at the end of the year. So they are encouraged and required to, every 3 months, are supposed to send money to the IRS. They're called quarterly payments ahead of time to hold. So when they file the taxes, the money is already there, because we're a pay-as-you-go society. That's how we're supposed to do this. This is what a tax return looks like. This is the top of the first page. And again, this is where we report all of our income. And this is where we claim any credits that we're entitled to. And we also list our family that we help support and live with for these taxes. And why do we do this? To make sure we're paying our fair share and not too much. Who should file a tax return? Well, the IRS says if you make over a certain amount of money, you should file a tax return, and you legally have to file a tax return. But even if you don't make that, and we'll talk about these limits in a little bit, even if you don't make that amount of money and you're working, you really should file. Because we have some wonderful, wonderful credits that are designed to boost people out of poverty, but you can't get them if you don't file a tax return. And you might be entitled to credits because of your children or your family size or different things. They might have also taken out too much money out of your paycheck. And if you don't legally have to file because your income's so low, the only way you're going to get that money back is to file a tax return. So anybody who works should file it. Can you get in trouble if you do not file a tax return? Or if the tax return that you filed was wrong? Can you get in trouble? Absolutely. If your return is wrong, you could be subject to penalties and interest. Sometimes the penalties can be really high. If they are considering that you filed a fraudulent return or a frivolous return, you can be looking at some really, really, really high penalties. There's also liens. If you owe a lot of money to the IRS, they can put a lien on your property, which means you can't sell it. They could take it from you, possibly, if you don't get caught up. Imagine them putting a lien on the home you live in or the car you drive. Garnishment. That means they can actually contact your employer and say, hey, every time he gets paid, I need you to send us 20% of their paycheck or 30% or whatever it is. So they can take money directly out of your paycheck before you ever see it. You can also go to jail. If you have this long term, you owe them a lot and you're not paying, you're not communicating with them, they could put you in jail. And if you have a passport, they can revoke it to where you can't leave the country. What's most important to understand is that the taxpayer is ultimately responsible for whatever is on that tax return. It doesn't matter if they filed it, if their friend filed it for them, or if they paid somebody to file their return for them. That tax return is their responsibility. Some people think that if they pay somebody to do their return, that it's going to be correct. And if it's not correct, whoever they paid is responsible for it. And that's not true. So this is why everybody should at least learn the basics about taxes. Because if you know the basics, you can file the return yourself, save some money, and know it's done right. But for whatever reason, maybe you don't want to file a tax return, you don't feel comfortable with it, and that's fine. Pay somebody else to do it, but review that return before you sign it, before you let them process it. Make sure it's correct. You should at least have the basic knowledge to understand whether that return is right or not. Does the refund seem too high or the balance due too crazy? Because whatever's on that return, you're responsible for. And this is where our program VITA comes in and why it is so important. VITA stands for Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. Millions and millions and billions of dollars are left on the table every year that people don't get. They don't file their return to get it. There are many people who are paying people to do their taxes, and they're being done wrong, and they're getting in trouble for it. And, we're talking about low-income people. This happens to a lot of people, but low-income people are really being hit with this. They're being taken advantage of. They don't know taxes, and they don't feel comfortable, and people promise them these huge refunds. Well, guess what? Sometimes, too good to be true is too good to be true. So we do no cost returns. Every return we do is double checked. We have a really high accuracy rate. We're not going to put fake stuff on there. The return we do is going to be right. But we need to help people. We need to make sure they're not wasting their money, they're not paying to have their taxes done, and they're not being taken advantage of. Because filing taxes, it's a legal obligation. You legally have to file taxes, so why should you have to pay somebody to do it? Why should you have to pay to do what you were forced to do? That doesn't seem fair. And again, the only way to get some of these credits is to file a tax return. These credits are designed to help you out financially. So why should you have to pay somebody and lose money to get those credits you're entitled to? Many, many people are taken advantage of. The average fee is about $300. I've seen people get charged over $1,000, and I had one this summer that I saw was charged $3,315. There is no need for that. So our program, not only are we going to do the return right, but we're going to save them money. What could you do with $300? What could a lot of people do with $300? They could buy groceries, a medicine. They could pay their electric bill. Electricity's gone up. Cost of gas has gone up, and rent and everything's gone up. Maybe they need to buy shoes for their kids. So have your pay to do your taxes, or pay to get new clothes and shoes for your kids. Pay the electric bill. Or maybe they don't need anything right now, but they can at least put that money into their savings in case something happens. Our program last year, or this year that we're currently in, that we're wrapping up in 2024, the taxes that we have done, we filed over 8,800 returns in Lee, Hendry, Charlotte, and Immokalee. We've issued out over $9.1 million in refunds. The amount of fees that people did not have to pay to get their taxes done is over $2.6 million that we save people. And we had 234 volunteers that volunteered over 18,000 hours. Altogether, we're looking at over a $12.3 million impact to the community. And there's so many more people we could help, which is why we need more volunteers.